In this week's episode of Studio Inter, we'll be reviewing the games against Parma and Shakhtar Donetsk. We'll be previewing the Champions League game against Real Madrid with David Garrido from Sky Sports UK, as well as the Atalanta game, this week's Moggi, Moratti and Frog, and much, much more. Everything here on Studio Inter, only on SempreInter.com. Benvenuti, bentornati to another edition of Studio Inter. I'm your host Nima, Tavallaey, wishing you to an episode where at least one of the panelists is going to be working really hard to stay positive, because I don't have a lot to be positive about. But before we get to all of that, let me introduce him and the rest of the panelists, starting with Mr. Positivity, Mystic Mo, Mr. the SempreInter.com preview writer, Mr. Mohammed Nasser.
That's why I get paid the big bucks, you know.
To talk people off the ledge.
Yeah. No, we'll talk you off the ledge. No worries.
Well, okay. Well, we'll see, because I know a lot of people listening, a lot of the listeners have said that they definitely need their dose of positivity this week. And returning again for the first time in a long time, he is the host of He's a host on Inter Miami CF. He's also a host on Culture Connection Pod and on Onside Radio 1 to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday Eastern. Mr. Alex Dono.
Hey Nima, hey guys, I'm very happy to be back. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to have you. I've been congrats on the new gig.
Thank you.
It's that's why I know that you won't be able to come on as much. So that's why we kind of moved this to the Sunday so we could have you with us as well.
That's a lot of pressure.
Well, you deliver, I hope, anyway. I'm sure you will. And we're also joined by our good friend over in London, Mr. William Beckman.
Hello. Yes. Preparing for another month of Zoom calls and other lockdown-based goodness.
Yes.
You're going to be very important. This podcast will be important for my sanity over the next month or so. It always is, but even more so than usual.
For sure, and we're happy, and I'll happy do that, and also you too as well, Will, because Inter will. I mean, I don't know if this podcast will save us all, because Antonio Conte is definitely doing his best to drive us all insane. At least that's how I see it. But before we get into all of that, I'd like to introduce our guest. He is a presenter over on Sky Sports UK. He's also the founder of content hub La Liga Lowdown, making his Studio Inter debut. Welcome, Mr. David Garrido.
Thank you very much, guys. Yeah, really looking forward to being involved in this ep and having a good chat with you guys about, obviously, Real Madrid and how things are going into this season.
Well, let's start there, because Real Madrid they won the La Liga last season, and they've kind of stumbled. They've started this season a little bit in a questionable way. And I mean, this is not the Real Madrid and Barcelona that we saw just 2-3 years ago. It's clearly they're both in some sort of rebuild phase, although Real Madrid have come further down the path than Barcelona have. But I have watched a little bit of Real Madrid, and it's really difficult to understand where they are in terms of form. So I wanted to. That's why I wanted to have you on. I want you to a little bit just lay out the text on where are they as a team? I mean, they've had quite a few injuries. Now we're reading about COVID-19 infections, unconfirmed reports about that being Sergio Ramos, who obviously is incredibly important to Real Madrid. How would you describe Real Madrid's start of the season so far?
Yeah, mixed. I think they started off well. There was an early draw at Real Sociedad, but then they picked up some wins. And then, as is inevitably the case with Real Madrid, they're never too far away from some sort of crisis. Because when you look at Real Madrid, you always look through the lens of the most intense magnifying glass. Now, I'm not a Real Madrid fan, but then if you are, it's even more acute than that. And the home defeat against Cadiz, newly promoted, at Valdebebas, at their, I suppose, home ground, if you like, whilst the Bernabeu is having refurbishments done, was a real shock. And then, of course, the performance first half against Shakhtar Donetsk, and they couldn't quite get back into that game to get something out of it. And Zinedine Zidane, it felt like the pressure was once again right on him. They were saying, well, don't win the Clásico and you could be out of a job. That's how things work in Madrid. And of course, the Spanish press don't help that. You've got papers like Marca and Diario AS who are sort of ramping things up. Everything's extreme. And that's why you have to understand that's the prism through which you see Real Madrid. And they, they themselves feed that, I guess. And also add to that, you always have to think of it in terms of how are Barca doing. And so, of course, the Clásico, therefore, was super important. And yes, you're right. I think that Madrid are further down the track in terms of how they are trying to reinvent themselves. Remember, no signings this summer for Real Madrid, which is unheard of. But it seems like they are just trying to wait until the opportunity comes to sign. And Mbappe, for example, that's the player they desperately want. And so in the meantime, it's just that little bit of I suppose, reinvention. So that was a turnaround, and that was important, that win against Real Madrid. The fight back against Borussia Mönchengladbach, I mean, listen, this is where Madrid and Inter have something in common. They both had to score late goals to get something out of a game against Borussia Mönchengladbach. And then they really clicked against Huesca. And it felt like it made sense. But remember that Zidane is a manager who's perhaps known more as a manager of egos and energies rather than a coach. And he keeps tweaking his lineup. Like last season, he fielded 36 different starting 11s in the 38 league games. So he's a man who just keeps tinkering and tweaking. But it seems like against Huesca, even though it's Huesca, we got a sense of who he's going to go with against Inter Milan. So I feel that they are moving in the right direction. They've picked up a bit of momentum. Suddenly now, back-to-back La Liga wins, having had back-to-back defeats in all competitions. That comeback against Borussia Mönchengladbach. But they do really need a result against Inter Milan, because right now, as it stands, mad as you'd say it, for the most successful European team, they're bottom of that group. So they really do need to get a result at Valdebebas.
For sure. Mo, I'm going to hand you over to Mo for a question, if you have a question for David.
Yeah, hi, David. So quick question. What is Inter's clearest path to victory, having seen Real Madrid's roller coaster performances so far this season? What are they most susceptible to?
Well, one of the things that they have to be very aware of is that they are playing their third choice right back, who's not even a right back, and he's doubtful. So at the time of recording right now, Lucas Vázquez has had a bit of a muscle injury from that game against Huesca. He's a right winger. I mean, he's or even a right forward. And he was always Zidane's kind of go-to, as the change up almost every time the first sub he'd make, around 65 minutes, bring on Lucas Vázquez. But because of the injuries to, firstly, Dani Carvajal, then also Álvaro Odriozola and Nacho, who's like, Mr. Versatile in the defence, suddenly now, in fact, not even third choice, fourth choice right back. So I think that's an area that Inter and Antonio Conte could try and target. And I do wonder, especially if you can get a little bit of joy down your left flank, if Perisic can maybe just be quite brave and pin Lucas Vázquez back, and there should be some space to exploit there when he gets forward. And I do think Real Madrid, without Sergio Ramos, are susceptible. And if we'll wait to see what's happened in terms of COVID-19 test at Valdebebas, and that really affected Castilla with the B side. But Madrid without Ramos are a very different team to a Madrid with Ramos. So I think we'll have to wait and see on that. But I certainly feel that there are big question marks around them. When you go down to Varane and Militao or something like that, I just think you lack the leadership. And you look at Madrid's spine, that's where they have had the consistency. Courtois has been excellent in goal. Ramos, of course, the leader, goal scorer as well as defender. Then in midfield, Casemiro is one of the metronomes, and he is, I think he's been underrated for a very, very long time, and people just think he's, someone who just happily just about avoids yellow cards all game. And then you push forward to Benzema, and you've got people like Valverde who are coming back into form as well. So I think that the spine is very, very strong, especially if Ramos plays. But I think the flanks, and particularly on their right flank, on your left flank, that maybe there's some you could probably exploit something there.
Alex, did you have a question for David?
Yeah, hey, David. I did catch Eden Hazard scoring a great goal over the weekend. Of course, he's had all the injury trouble since coming over. Sort of, how do you sum up his time so far at Real Madrid, and does he really need to prove he was worth that big money move?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because I guess in his absence, there's not been one person who's absolutely come in and torn it up. I mean, Vinicius Jr. has had his moments. I think he's really added to his game. He's improving, but he's still incredibly young. And I think that Eden Hazard, in a weird sort of way, has been a little lucky that hasn't sort of been the case. Marco Asensio has been out injured as well. Of course, Bale's not there at the moment. So I think actually it's been frustrating for him. There was obviously question marks, not just over injuries, but his fitness when he first joined Real Madrid. He looked overweight. And he just never got enough minutes and enough consistency, enough of a run to show the talent that he inevitably absolutely has got. That goal against Huesca was brilliant. It was the turning point in the game. Madrid scored again very quickly before half time, and then suddenly that team talk for Zinedine Zidane is very different. And he absolutely has quality, and I fully expect him to start against Inter Milan. And I feel like now maybe he's feeling okay. I've got my first start under my belt. I came on as a sub against Borussia Mönchengladbach. I can make the impact, and I think Madrid are looking to him to do that. Remember, they did pay an awful lot of money for him, so I think that it's now ripe. It's now the time for Eden Hazard to show exactly the player he is, the Chelsea Hazard that obviously the Premier League was lucky enough to grace their stage for so many years.
Will, did you have a question for David?
Yeah, I was going to ask about Hazard, but that's been covered. So I just thought maybe a question on the Spanish teams in general in this year's Champions League, because of course they've been dominating for the last few years, but it seems like a slightly weakened crop of sides this year. I'm just wondering, if you were to put your money behind one of them, which team would you give the best chance of going deep in this competition? Because obviously in the past it would have been a no-brainer. Real Madrid have won. They won those 3 Champions Leagues in a row. Barcelona have the best player in the world, arguably. But, I look at Atletico and, they got a result against Salzburg. They've got some great forwards. João Felix has been in good form. And I also think Sevilla are a really impressive team. Obviously we experienced that last summer, or the summer that just went in the Europa League final. And I think if they had a striker, they could probably give anyone a game at the moment. They ran Bayern Munich close in the Super Cup a month or so ago. So, do you think any of these teams? Can you see any of these teams winning the tournament this year, or is this sort of a transitional period? And will there be a chance maybe for someone that doesn't come from Spain to finally win this tournament?
Do you know what? It's a really interesting question, because my first instinct when you started the question was, who's the least worst at the moment? And I'd probably say Atletico. And also, there's this kind of tendency, I think, especially amongst Spanish football fans and analyst experts, that if you're not sure out of Real Madrid or Barcelona, as a kind of sideline, you go, I back Atletico. But they never have made good on that since 2014. And in fact, until the Europa League in 2018, they hadn't won another trophy in that intervening period. The La Liga title in 2013-14, you might remember when they went to the Camp Nou, Diego Godin with that equaliser 1-1. That was the point they needed. All they needed to do to guarantee the title was not lose. They managed to do that, and they broke, the duopoly. I think they're really interesting at the moment, and I think that maybe out of all of the teams you've mentioned, they have the most consistency right now. I like Sevilla, but they're on a bit of a bad run of form, especially in La Liga. I mean, you would never have expected this. Losing 1-0 to Granada, losing 1-0 at home to Eibar. Being 1-0 up away to Atletico, but then being turned around and losing 2-1. They're currently down in 15th in the table. And normally they're the quick starters. They're the ones who have a good run going into Christmas, New Year, and then inevitably they sort of fall off a cliff and they really suffer in the spring. I think that Real Madrid are the team who, despite their loss and their draw in the first couple of games of the group, I think they're the team that probably I would back Zidane to energise the squad, to get the best out of those talented players and get them deep. I'm really not sure about Barcelona right now. Obviously, things are just very. It's been a tumultuous time, hasn't it? With what's happened with Messi over the summer, with Bartomeu on the board resigning, Koeman being someone who was appointed by the previous president and board. Feels like he could well be a dead man walking. Is he likely to see out the season? Just no one really knows. And certainly with that kind of real sort of situation of flux, can you back them? I'm not sure that you can. So I would say, if anyone, Atletico, probably. I like João Felix alongside Luis Suarez. I'm not saying it's like Suarez and Sturridge back in 2014, but there's something there that I feel there's a kind of nice mentoring relationship where I feel that they can prosper together. And, maybe this is the year that, the weird year, right? It's not the weirdest thing to say, but I think that Atletico certainly have a fighting chance. So in a roundabout way, I'm going to probably back them and Real Madrid to be the ones that go deep. And if Zidane can get the consistency out of his side, I think this, as they call it, once de gala, the sort of, star 11 that we expect to take to the pitch against Inter Milan, could well be the one that he really backs and that maybe goes deep in the tournament.
So focusing more on the game on Tuesday, it's a double header. I mean, first obviously it's you have that game, then you have the international break, and then you have the return leg. What's your feeling going into Tuesday's game? Do you think another draw, or do you think that Real would win, or what's your thoughts? Or do you think even Inter can win?
I think Real are desperate for the win, and often it's funny because when you talk about big games, I mean they're talking about all of these games as finales, as finals, which is weird when you talk about Huesca, who promoted again from Segunda to La Liga. That shouldn't be a final. Why is it called a final? Okay, yes, they needed to get some consistency in the league, especially after the Cadiz defeat and the defeat to Shakhtar. But, this game does feel more significant. We know about Real Madrid's love affair with the European Cup, going all the way back, more than half a century, 70 odd years. And I think because they really need the result, I think they will get the result. It's very much the way that you consider Clásicos. When you look at the respective positions of the teams going into a Clásico, often the team that gets the result is the one that needs it the most. And so I get a sense that probably there are more questions around Inter Milan than there are around Real Madrid, just with this upturn of form in the last week or so, where Madrid seem to have rediscovered something. I think that Fede Valverde is going to be incredibly important. I feel like he really energized the team against Huesca. He has that. Yeah, that's basically what he brings, and I feel that he's going to be very busy, and I sense that he could put Madrid in control of that midfield. Kroos will provide, that knitting together of play. Casemiro is the man, as I said, who sort of sets the tempo and makes sure that he puts himself about two. I would imagine Modric will be on the bench, and I think that if they set up that way and they make sure that they manage the match correctly, I reckon that Madrid would probably do enough to get the 3 points because they need them.
For sure, they're definitely they have to win. I mean, both of these teams kind of have to win, which Real more than Inter, obviously, because they only have 1 point. Inter have two. Thank you so much for coming on, David. If you have something you want to promote, I know you guys do a lot of stuff on La Liga Lowdown.
That's very kind. Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a really talented squad that I've got over there on La Liga Lowdown. I founded it 2.5 years ago and was fully involved when we got going, and now I sort of I suppose like a director of football. I suppose I sign the players and I step back and let them play, and they're very driven and, as I say, talented, and they're producing some great stuff. So on the website, especially. And obviously, given his time in Italy as well, this is a really good long read by a guy called Alan Fahili, who's one of our new signings this summer, on Diego Maradona turning 60 on Friday. Nice. And really good read. The Twitter feed is always nice and lively. We try and be creative with what we do. We try and add value. We don't just tweet goals when goals go in. I just feel that's a bit pointless. Everyone does that. And also our podcast, which you can just look up La Liga Lowdown on all your usual sort of podcast distributors and providers. So it's a kind of a three-pronged attack, and we're doing okay. So if you guys want to check that out, then we'd be delighted to have you with us.
And if they want to follow you on Twitter, it's at Sky Sport David, right?
At Sky Sports David, correct.
Well, thank you very much for coming on, David. Really, really appreciate it. And we hope you're wrong in your predictions.
Well, I most of the time I am. So maybe that's good for you guys. No, absolute pleasure being on with you.
Take care. Have a good night.
Thanks, David.
Right. That was David Garrido from Sky Sports UK and La Liga Lowdown to help us look a little bit behind the look a little bit closer at Real Madrid. And one thing that really got me was when he said Toni Kroos. When he mentioned Toni Kroos' name and Casemiro, and I remember that they have Luka Modric, I have I don't know how the hell Inter are going to win this game, because that's like the first feeling I get. But then again, I remember that Inter do well against teams that attack, and Real Madrid attack. They're not going to sit like Shakhtar and Parma and park the bus, the boat, or the plane, as Mourinho so eloquently once stated. They're going to go attack, and that's going to allow Inter to attack as well. Are Inter solid enough defensively? Well, that remains to be seen. I think I think we'll see the same formation as against Shakhtar Donetsk. I think Gagliardini will definitely play. I think Barella will join him. I don't think Christian Eriksen will play. I think it will be Arturo Vidal. I absolutely don't think it will be Raja Nainggolan. I don't think we'll ever see Raja Nainggolan again in an Inter shirt after what happened this weekend. And then you have Hakimi and Darmian on the wings, and the defense will be Bastoni, De Vrij, and D'Ambrosio. And Lukaku won't be there. So up front, it's Lautaro and hopefully Alexis Sanchez or Ivan Perisic. So that's the formation I think we're going to go with. But Inter are out of form. Aside from everything else, Inter are out of form, and I worry, and I think that the sheer quality and class that Real Madrid have in central midfield will decide this. Although I hope I'm wrong. Mo, what about you?
Yeah, no, I mean it's definitely it's definitely not the time to make any superbly optimistic predictions.
But that's why you're here.
I don't think we're.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do your job.
No, look, I
don't.
I
do that, then
I most definitely think that we're getting out of the group, but I don't think that this will be the game. I think a draw is on the cards here. I think Inter are going to play themselves, present a very good version of themselves. I think, like you said, Nima, we definitely do much better against teams that don't sit back, and Real Madrid certainly will not. So I think in general, and you talk about that Madrid midfield, and it's pretty damn impressive. But Modric is 34 now. I think our central midfield is definitely with Lukaku not playing is definitely our strongest suit at the moment. So I'm not too concerned there. It's at the back, and the problem with the back is if we don't score, then we just let in goals. And currently, of course, Lautaro's form is such that he can't seem to hit a barn door. So I think it's going to be a draw. But I definitely think that the boys, Conte, everyone's going to be up for the game. It's to a degree where no one's going to take it lightly. Everyone's going to be extra serious, maybe even sharper in front of goal. Because we're not scoring not for the lack of chances or trying. It's just that the conversion is abysmal, and crossbars and posts are plotting against us, along with VAR and referees. So it's I'm definitely not going to go out there and say we're going to win, but I certainly think that this will not be the match where qualification from the group is lost. So I think at least the point is on the cards.
What about you, Alex? What do you think?
Yeah, this game is very much an enigma for me. You start with Real Madrid, and yeah, as David pointed out, overall their form is improving, 2 La Liga wins in a row, but in both their Champions League matches so far, they've really had disastrous starts to those games. They nearly salvaged a draw against Shakhtar. They did salvage a draw against Mönchengladbach, but really, really poor starts in those games. Now, of course, the Interista in me feels that they're going to find their Champions League form in this match, of course. That's just the I'll be the pessimist and Mo's optimist, but they've really had just a really slow run in form to start Champions League. Then on the Inter side of things, Mo hit it on the head when he talks about poor conversion, because obviously you go back to a little over a week ago against Genoa. It was just a really, really poor first half period, no creation or conversion. But in the Shakhtar game and then against Parma, chances created versus chances conceded, those ratios were through the charts in favor of Inter. They just can't finish these chances. I really think that this match is going to be decided on a couple of things if Inter's going to get a positive result. The first of those, of course, we know are, not making poor mistakes at the back, which has been something that, hopefully Kolarov doesn't start or play, because that's been a huge factor. If he's not out there, that's going to help. And so we know that. I mean, cutting out the mistakes at the back, of course, it goes without saying. I think Lautaro Martinez's form could decide this game because they're going to be very reliant on him to score without Lukaku, and he's been really poor in these last handful of games. And I just don't think Inter are going to get a victory or even a draw if Lautaro doesn't score or at least, assist, contribute, draw a penalty, something like that. I think he needs to be really good in this game. He can't be invisible the way that he's been or missing easy chances the way that he has in these last couple of matches, and Inter expect to take anything away from this. I think he's going to be incredibly important. And then, of course, keep your eyes out. If Lautaro does have a big game against Real Madrid, that's going to start up the Barcelona rumors again. So either way, we lose on that. So we'll see what happens.
For sure. I personally think that Courtois will be the deciding factor. I think Real will win, narrow win 1-0, and I think he'll once again he'll show how important it is to have a world-class goalkeeper, which Real Madrid do, and unfortunately Inter currently don't. But we'll get to all of that in our review games. Because there's a stat I want to talk to you about. But Will, before we conclude the Real Madrid game, what are your thoughts going into Real Madrid Inter on Tuesday?
Yeah, I'm sat in camp pessimism with you and Alex. I think you reeled off the talent they have in midfield, and you realise that most likely the problem in these first two Champions League matches against Shakhtar and against Shakhtar side that was decimated by COVID and maybe on paper didn't look like it's too big an obstacle for them, and a Borussia Mönchengladbach side that came out of pot four. I think the problem in that match for Madrid must have been a psychological approach issue. We said that they fell behind 3-0 and 2-0 in both those games, but then when they got themselves going against Shakhtar, they almost got a draw from 3-0 down, and they rescued a draw when it seemed lost against Gladbach. So I can't imagine that they're going to be that lax again when they take to the field on Tuesday, because as David said, they need the win. They didn't desperately need the points against either of those teams in their first two matches, and with Madrid needing a win and having never gone out of the Champions League group stages before, I find it hard to envisage a scenario where they're on 1 point after 3 games. This happened last year as well. They got thumped by PSG in their first group game. And then in the next match, they drew at home to Bruges at the Bernabeu and almost lost that. Then they went to the third game away in Galatasaray. Zidane was under pressure for his job, and they got the win because they needed it. And then they sort of steadied the ship from there and went on and at least got out of the group. So it's not a great time to be playing them. It would have been better if they'd been on 6 points heading into this game, honestly, because then that there would have been a margin for error for them that we would have been able to exploit. If you wanted to be slightly pragmatic, you could say that one win in these 2 games is okay, because that would leave you on 5 points with 2 games left. So maybe if we lose this game, it's not all over because we've got the game at San Siro. But if we're just limiting it to this game, I find it really, especially if Hazard is back as well. He looked like he was resembling a top-level footballer again for the first time in about a year. So that's another good news story for Inter at the moment, who are full of good news stories and good luck.
Well, I mean,
but yeah, I agree that if Sanchez plays, that gives us a much better chance than if not, because we saw what the alternatives were or weren't on Saturday against Parma. Lautaro and Sanchez was the pair that played against Barcelona at the Camp Nou last season, and they had a brilliant first half. Lautaro scored the opening goal, and they seemed to work pretty well then. But the problem is that it's not the Lautaro of 12 months ago, and it's not the Sanchez of 12 months ago, because he's just coming back from another injury. So I think I agree that I'm really finding it difficult to see too many goals in this match, and with the really soft mistakes that are being made at the back at the moment, and the fact that Real Madrid have their backs against the wall, I find it pretty much impossible to be optimistic for this match, unfortunately.
Well, speaking of backs against the wall, Inter really have their backs against the wall in the Serie A against Atalanta a few days later after the Real Madrid game. If a Scudetto is, for those of you who believe in Scudettos for Inter this year, that's a must-win game. Inter can't afford to draw that because they're already 5 points behind Milan, who are off to a flying start. And it's an Atalanta that we've seen be very inconsistent, that score that have done well in the Champions League, and then were destroyed by Napoli in the Serie A, and they came back a little bit and looked a little bit more stable against Crotone. So it's kind of hard to know where they are. But we do know that Atalanta always turn up against Inter, especially when as long as they have Gasperini there, who just can't, who loves to stick it to Inter and will never ever stop talking about when he was at Inter for a brief period and was sacked. So that's also something that we have to deal with on the Saturday, on the Sunday at 3 p.m. CET. That's a game that I'm thinking that will finally put the nail in the coffin of the Scudetto talks, and Crisi Inter will be an actual fact from then on, because Atalanta are exactly the kind of team that can hurt Inter, that can hurt an Inter that have lost their entire identity defensively, that have lost their entire ability to and self-confidence in front of goal. Inter just cannot score goals, or take the lead at least. I mean, we've seen it throughout this entire season, except for against Benevento when Inter were doing their Zdenek Zeman impression, but. This is an issue, and I'm really, really worried because this is what I've been. The reason why I was angry this summer, as most of you who follow me on social media and Alex Dono can attest to, because I sent him raging voice memos on WhatsApp. You did. During this summer. Look, my anger period for what's happening now was then, because everything that's happening now to me was incredibly predictable. You could see this happening from a mile away, and that's why you needed to have a different mercato than what you did. Now to the way I see it, you're just circling the drain now. Let's just play out the cards and hope for the best, a top 4 position. There is no way Inter are going to win the Scudetto, but I know that there are people out there who think that they are. So I'm just gonna so I'm not gonna belabor that point too much. But all I'm gonna say is I think that this game, the game against Atalanta, will show once and for all why Inter won't win the Scudetto. Alex, any thoughts? You disagree?
Wow, that's a frightening sentence you just said there. I mean, you're really making me feel queasy to think that that the outcome of match day 6 is going to be the death knell for the entire season. I understand where you're coming from. I don't know if I'd go that far because now I reserve the right to change my mind depending on how Inter look Tuesday against Real Madrid. I might, or midweek against Real. I'm not sure if it's a Tuesday or when. Or it is a Tuesday, yeah. Election day here in the United States. So I reserve the right to change my mind based on how poor they look in that match. But I honestly, looking ahead to Atalanta, I don't feel so terrible about that one because Atalanta's been really, really poor at the back. Now the question is Inter going to be able to take advantage of that? Now, I think that some of these failures to score in these last couple of matches, certainly I'm not giving them a pass, but I think that there is, maybe going to be a progression to the mean, because when you have enough free headers 7 feet in front of the keeper that you're putting right on the keeper, and you've also had a couple of what look like clear penalties not given and not even checked by the VAR, and I'll get more on that a little bit later. Believe me that I've got to believe that, this is not purely poor form. Some of it is a little bit of bad luck. And again, this is not me predicting a Scudetto. This is me saying that for as tough as the current run of form may be, there may be a better run of form coming because things tend to even themselves out a little bit in this game. So, yeah, I don't know if I'm completely ready to say that match day 6 is going to decide the entire season. If they look terrible, it might. But I do think that is a game Inter can win. They did defeat Atalanta, late in the season after the COVID break and looked pretty good doing it at the end of last year. So they're not too far removed from good form against Atalanta. So, it's hard for me to make a prediction since I want to see how they look against Real Madrid. But I'll make a prediction because that's what we do here. And I'm going to say a 2-1 victory for Inter at the weekend.
I see. I don't think the season's going to be lost. I'm just saying the Scudetto's lost. I think it's going to dawn on people that how far off Inter are where they need to be, because it's not just I don't think it's just a quality issue. I think it's a lot of issues. I think it's a balance issue. Inter have not really had any balance under Antonio Conte since he took over, and I think what we're seeing now is when you have important players who are supposed to lead, who are either out of form, like Lautaro and De Vrij, or injured, like Lukaku, or players brought in that are supposed to lead, who are way past their sell-by date, like Vidal, Kolarov, Perisic, and so on. And then you have a marquee signing in Christian Eriksen that is having some form of existential crisis, and you have Antonio Conte on top of that. It's like the perfect storm. And this club doesn't work like other clubs, and therefore that's why I'm saying that it's the Scudetto is I didn't believe in it to begin with, and now I think that most people are going to see it the way I see it after the Atalanta game. I still think that Inter, or hope that Inter finish top four, because I don't even want to think about the disaster financially it would imply not finishing in the top four for Inter. This is, I don't even want to think about it. Like that gives me nightmares at night, just thinking about Inter trying to take on a season after COVID without Champions League money. I mean, it's just, it just gives me, it creeps me out. But Will, what do you think against Atalanta? Do you think that Inter will bounce back magically, and all of a sudden it will say click, and everything that Antonio Conte wants will suddenly work? Or do you still see that they got trials and tribulations ahead of them?
Well, I hope it clicks, because we've won one game in 6, so it's time to get things together. If you're a serious team, you will change your attitude once and for all. That's the thing that was so disappointing in the match against Parma, just the complete lack of urgency, or the complete inability to adapt to to a match without Lukaku, which was so disappointing. A lack of sort of bite in front of goal, a really sort of flat performance. So if you start putting 3 or 4 of those in a row together, then you have a lot of questions to answer as a squad from a mental point of view. I don't know if we're going to win that match, because it's very difficult. Even with Lukaku, that would have been tough. Obviously, we don't know if he's going to play. If he does, then that's great. That gives us a chance. If not, I find it very difficult to see how we get 3 points from that match. Atalanta are a little bit up and down, as you said. Difficult to read, like honestly every team is at the moment. So making predictions is even harder than it is normally, but I'd be surprised if we won that match. I'll put it like that. I wouldn't be entirely surprised if we had 2 defeats this week, because we're not in form. So the immediate future doesn't look particularly positive, but this is a strange season. Football changes quickly at the best of times. So even if we were to have 2 defeats, I certainly will not be ruling out Inter's chances of winning the Scudetto. I think you're being too strong in that sense, personally, because frankly, it's not going to take as much as it would have done in previous years to win this league title. And unless you think that Milan are going to win the Scudetto, which maybe you do, everyone else is waiting for Inter. If Juventus are 1 point ahead, and that's only because they were handed a match against Napoli. Napoli themselves lost a few hours before we recorded this on Sunday, and are only 1 point ahead. There is time to get things right. The problem that we've seen in the last few games is that you need to be able to get points while you're not at your best, because this isn't Inter's maximum potential. It's not going to be this bad, I don't think, all season, because we're kind of not that far away from pre-season in terms of sort of preparation time in a regular season. So I don't think it's a surprise that there are so many teething problems to sort out. The problem is that these games matter, and we're not showing the bite to win the games, not taking the chances, and are being quite inefficient in both penalty boxes. 2 shots and 2 goals for Parma, 2 shots and 2 goals for Gladbach, 20 shots and 2 goals against Parma, with one of them coming right at the end. It's not good enough in that sense. So I don't know how you solve that. I guess it's a mental issue if you're not taking your chances and you're giving up goals so easily at the back. But short term, yes, I agree. Difficult, possibly 2 defeats, possibly a defeat on Sunday. Long term, there's a very, very long way to go yet. And I'm still confident that things will get better, if not in the immediate term. Let's say that.
Well, from a skeptic, from the negative to the skeptic to the positive, Mo, what are your thoughts?
I feel it in my bones, man. I feel it in my bones. I told you last year, second place in the Europa League. We got to the final. Unfortunately, we couldn't make it through. I feel it in the same way, man. And you know me, I'm the first person to play down any Scudetto talk. Particularly last year, we said we'd talk about it in April consistently.
Yeah.
But I feel like this is all the makings of something growing. Will just I think Will made a great point right now in that we're not far removed from the preseason. It really is a work in progress. In the best of circumstances, add to the fact, of course, that we lost 7 players to COVID. We've now lost 2 of our already thin attacking line players to injury in Alexis and Lukaku, of course. So there's a lot of moving pieces to this story. Refereeing decisions, scandalous, and I think like Alex said earlier, we like it gets a bit tiring talking about it. Yeah, as Interisti, we're cognizant of the fact that the knock is always that we complain about referees, so we don't want to do it too much. But that hacking, that mauling of Perisic in the box was as clear of a penalty as can be. So it's all I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of moving pieces to Inter's results, and it's not just out of thin air that we've got just one win out of 6. Now, having said that, I really think that these big matches are the ones that could define a season in this, where we can team spirit, etc. So I look back at the August result against Atalanta in Bergamo, the 2-0. I think I'm hoping it's the same sort of result. So I'll venture a win here as well.
Yeah, I hope you're right, and I think we have to talk about that. I mean, the thing is, when Moratti after the game goes out and says what he says, I thought was very nice. I thought he was very calm. He was very serene. He didn't fry the referees as much as one could have expected and probably should. And I think it came a little bit too late. I wish Inter would have done this on match day 1. You can't give these guys any leeway because you know what happens when they do. They're the Serie A referees against Inter. You give them an inch, they take an arm. And Piccinini for sure has already done this. So you need to call them out immediately. That's the only way they'll keep in line. So there's no doubt that was a penalty. But to me, I mean, all of that aside, my issue with this project is that I don't think it's stable enough. And when you guys say that it's pre-season and there's teething issues, we're 16 months into the Antonio Conte project, and it's looking worse than it did 3 months into the Antonio Conte project. And that's why and the fact that he seems to me to be questioning what he's doing and this identity crisis that we spoke on previous episodes about, that to me suggests that, he knows that Inter he can't find the midfield to make this 3-man, 3-5-2, 3-4-1-2 work. So therefore, he's trying to overload the wings. And in order to do that and win the games that way. And when you do it that way, you have to have efficiency. When you don't have efficiency, you lose games and you look exposed. That to me suggests also that there's an instant of desperation involved. And that is never a good sign at Inter, especially at Inter. You can get away with that at other clubs, but you can't get away with desperation at Inter. The knives are out immediately. The sharks smell that stuff a mile away at Inter. And this is I'm not saying good, bad. It's just the reality of Inter. It's Inter's reality, and the reality is what we have to deal with. So to me, these two, because I also am on what Will said about 0 points this week. And I think after that, that's 2 weeks of incredible pressure of which Antonio Conte has never knew existed on this planet, is what he's going to have. And I mean, 2 wins and fine. The pressure has moved on because all of a sudden Inter have 5 points, 4 points ahead of Real Madrid. That's great, and they can almost secure a place in the second round in November already. That's great. But I and then Atalanta, even if they lose and draw that, and they've won against Real Madrid, that can mask that. But you're running out of time. You're running out of time to say, oh, but there's time to come along. Because I mean, Marcello Lippi famously said the Serie A really begins match day 10 and onwards. We're into match day 6, and we've won 2 games, Benevento and Fiorentina. Draw 1 against Lazio, Benevento, Fiorentina, and Genoa, Inter have won, but Lazio, Milan, and Parma, they've either drawn or lost. Now, Parma was a slam dunk. I mean, even against Genoa, it didn't look good, and everything. All that mattered are the points. I just don't see where, I don't see an embryo of what I'm supposed to be calm about to see that will guide us through this storm. And as we know, Inter is, as Trapattoni famously said, a centrifuge. Things are always accentuated at that club because that's just how it works. I'm genuinely concerned that for me, the way I look at it, it's top 4 for me this season, just top 4, and anything else than that is just a giant bonus. Because with Nainggolan looking like he does, Handanovic looking like he does, Stefan de Vrij being completely out of form, and et cetera, you don't have that much time to get these guys into form, and they have to work. So I don't know. I don't see where this is going to come from. And Romelu Lukaku has been bailing Inter out in those games where Inter have won. So I'm genuinely concerned. I'm really concerned, and I don't know where we go. But let's focus on that Parma game, because sure, Inter created a bit, created quite a few chances, but still, to me, if it's like Inter are yet to produce two halves of 45 minutes of football, consistent, like consecutive halves of good football. We're yet to see that from Inter. If it's a good first half, like against Schalke, it's followed by a poor second half because the teams adjust tactically, and Conte looks clueless and hapless on the sidelines, and that worries me, because when you look like that, that's a signal at Inter that your days are numbered. What do you think, Alex? You agree?
Yeah, unfortunately, I do agree. And you and I, we spoke a lot during the summer. We spoke a lot before, probably even during and after Conte had that infamous summit, with the Inter powers that be at Moratti's villa, and we kind of expected, because the Italian media made us expect that the outcome of that summit would be Conte stepping down and probably Allegri coming in. And of course, it went completely the opposite of what the Italian media expected. And really, since that time, a lot of our fears have only been confirmed. Fears coming out of the Mercato with the Kolarov edition has been especially horrific. These mistakes, Conte being, it almost seems like he's making such a concerted effort to be more muted in press conferences. It's almost as if I'm starting to suspect that he's doing it in almost an act of defiance, and that it's really changed who he is. And it's like, I don't even know what to make of this whole situation. But yeah, I agree with you. Everything is in a bad way right now.
For sure. Mo, I suspect you disagree.
I respectfully read it differently. I think it's a tough time. I think really we can't discount how difficult the start of the season has been for the project. We still don't have Skriniar back. It's everyone, the entire team's been ravaged, and it's not easy. It's not easy, and despite that, we're still unbeaten in the Champions League, hopefully qualifying from the group, 1 point behind Juventus in the league table. So yeah, I honestly don't. If the team was playing badly, if we weren't able to create chances, losing by being played by lesser teams, like that rough patch under Spalletti in February, March, April, or Mancini's meltdowns, or whatever, then I'd be concerned. But like you said, Nima, it seems like it's just a matter of balance, and it's almost there. It's but it just doesn't happen, And you talk about Lukaku bailing the team out, but that's the job. It's not like he's doing us a favor by. Goals. It's his job to score goals, and he's part of, he's part of the 11. It's like people used to say that Handanovic saved Inter, but that's his job to stop shots. He's a goalkeeper, so it's we can argue that Lukaku's form has transformed under Conte, and his presence is a direct consequence of Conte's man management and establishment of confidence and etc. So I don't see Conte as a dead man walking or under too much pressure. I think the project is much more mature. If anything, is that they're far more mature than the Moratti. They're far more mature than Pierre. They seem to really, especially in this manner of managing a project and managing the club in a very big picture sort of sense. So yeah, I'm still quite confident, unsurprisingly.
Right. Well, let's move on to the part of the show where we pay tribute, rip the piss out of, and criticize someone or something in the world of football, starting with the negativity, this week's Moggi, which will be presented by Mr. Alex Donald.
There are a number of directions I could go in. In fact, my original thought was to go after officiating, and not from a specific Inter point of view, because it's been pretty horrific lately with the use or non-use of VAR. We saw a very, very messy officiated game between Milan and Roma this past Monday. And then, of course, we can talk about the Perisic penalty that was not called until we're blue in the face. But we did cover the officiating a bit, okay? Yeah. So I want to put a spotlight on this idea that we're just going to keep doing international breaks during a pandemic. It's just... I am absolutely dreading next week when you have, for Inter and so many other teams, you're going to have, in some cases, a dozen players called up going all around Europe or all around the world. And I'm happy out there that we see officials from places like Borussia Dortmund, and I believe De Laurentiis at Napoli is trying to fight this. There's a time and a place for this stuff, but given where we are in the world right now, where I'm in the United States. I'm not even sure if this is the first, second, or third wave, or if the wave has just been going on. But then over in Europe, you have second waves ravaging a lot of countries. Will Beckman is back on lockdown in the UK. France has gone back into a lockdown now, and you really dread the protocols, the travel, and how many players could be infecting one another or bringing it back to their country once the break is over. So I really think that this is something where these clubs, FIFA, need to really reconsider the idea that you're going to be, with call-ups, forcing players to leave and go out and join their national teams, because it just seems like there's a time and a place for it, and this just doesn't seem like the time and place for that.
Yes, traveling during pandemics is not a good idea.
No.
Who knew? Right. Let's move on to something much more comical. This week's Frog, which will be presented by Mr. William Beck.
È clamoroso! Autogol di Ranocchia!
Yeah, we were all given a bit of a scare on Halloween, as Inter put in that rather strange and concerning performance against Parma, but it somehow ended up not being the weirdest and most frightening thing that I saw on Saturday evening. I think this week's Frog needs to be Patrice Evra, because he has, he's always been a bit of a maverick with his social media content, shall we say. I don't know if any of you remember the time he licked a raw chicken on an Instagram video a couple of years ago. He's a bit of a larger than life character, and this week he kind of reminded us of that with an Instagram video, which remarkably 24 hours later is still there. I would have thought someone might have had a word in his ear and advised him otherwise, but it's still there if you want to go and watch it. It's his little Halloween celebration, shall we say. So it's about 45 seconds long, and if you haven't seen it, essentially he's in an underground car park, which I really hope was empty at the time of recording. He's got his sort of black convertible car there with the number plate that says Patman. And you've got some sort of music blasting away in the background, and he begins this, well, kind of almost a routine, sort of perched on top of the windscreen of his car, and he's kind of gyrating almost before jumping down to the front with his black shirt and trousers, cape and sort of Batman mask on, a gold belt as well, just for good measure. He then starts sort of dancing on his feet back and forth in front of the car while shouting "Go Patman," as you know, because his name is Patrice. Before going in time to the music, goes "Happy Halloween, Happy Halloween!" Wah! At this point, you realise that he's not wearing matching shoes, because one of them is a red and white trainer, and the other one is it looks like it's either a black shoe or a shoe that's got like a bin bag sort of over it. He then sort of gives us a rendition of his favourite phrase, "I love this game," and then sort of twirls round to the side of his car, showing off his glitzy gold belt as he goes. Then he gets into the car, which obviously the on converters you get those doors that sort of open up like wings above the roof of the car. They're open, so he just sort of goes and sits in the car and says, while the music's going, obviously, "Let me see what's happening inside. Don't be jealous. I just want to share." And then he gives his car a rev so we can all hear it, just to remind us all that he's got a fast car, because footballers like having fast cars that are loud. Gives that a rev for a few seconds, and then he finishes off with what I can only describe as kind of baby noises, doing like a little pretend sort of like crying motion with his hand by his eye, and then I can't quite work out what he's saying, but it sounds like it's sort of he's saying like, "I made it, mama," like as if to say, "Look at me, I'm famous. I've done a good thing. I've done a good life for myself." But he says it in like a baby's accent, so it's kind of like, "Mama, I made it, mama," and then it ends. And I was none the wiser. I've watched it about 4 times, and I'm still not sure where it came from. I've discovered that it's not the first strange Halloween video he's done. He did one a few years ago where he was topless. I found this on YouTube, and he had sort of pumpkins sort of in front of him. He's got fake blood all over his chest, and he's got it holding a knife instead of what can only be described as a hostage scenario. So this is clearly a tradition he has of his sort of special Halloween gift for all of his followers. But yeah, I mean, all I can say is if Manchester United had played with the same sort of enthusiasm and intensity today against Arsenal that Edra put into this video, they wouldn't have lost. Because, you know, you can accuse Edra of a lot of things, but one thing you can't accuse him of is not living life by the, grabbing life by the horns and living everything with living everything as a full body experience. So that was a brilliant.
It's
still there. If I haven't, if I've not put you off it, it's still there.
I'm definitely looking into that because he is weird. Right, let's move on to something much more hopefully sane and positive for sure. This week's Moratti, which we presented by Mr. Positivity himself, Mr. Mohammed Nasser.
He works a lot, he's intelligent, and he surprises people sometimes with his ideas. Not easy to find one person of this qualities.
Yeah, so make it short and sweet this week. It's the return of the Croatian connection. It's very nice to see both Perisic and Brozovic get on the score sheet and very vitally. So back to 2016, 2017, I guess it is for us this week. They're my Morattis.
For sure, nice one. I get that. It was like I think it was 519 days since Perisic last scored, and Brozovic needs to. I mean, he needs to. He's been awful, and it was nice to see him against Parma to show that he cares. So that was the
first. That was the first brick of the massive wall of sort of massive comeback that he needs to. I've got lost in this analogy, but you see what I mean. That was the first step towards being accepted again by Inter, because he's got a lot of making up to do with his performances.
A lot of kissing up to do.
Yeah, but it was a nice goal, so we'll give him that. But sure. I'm not getting on all lovely with him yet.
No, not really. No, not yet. He's got more. He's still in the doghouse. Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's all we had time for this week. I'd like to thank David Garrido of Sky Sports UK. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Alex Dono.
Oh, thank you so much. Hopefully a couple of wins to close out the week. That would be great, and always a pleasure to be back.
Yeah, and don't be a stranger.
I won't.
And as always, Mr. Positivity, Mohammed Nassar.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a great episode. Apologies about my spotty internet connection, but yeah, it is what it is.
Don't worry about it. I think the positivity, nothing can stop your positivity. Your rays of positiveness shining through all over the world. As always, Mr. William Beckman, thank you.
Thank you. Fearing 0 points, hoping perhaps unrealistically for 6. See you next week.
For sure. And until next week, I'm your host, Nima Tavallaey, wishing you good health, 6 points, and sempre e solo forza.